Welcome to Refirement Life, the podcast for anyone navigating life transitions or planning to make life transitions to ensure your next years are your best years. Listen in for insightful, generous, and sometimes humorous conversation. It's time to get fired up with Christine Zamuda and Muge Wood, your hosts for this latest episode of Refirement Life.
I am thrilled to have Josh Block here today. Josh has led teams through growth, transition, and transformation with one conviction at the center: people matter more. After decades of leading at the intersection of business and humanity, Josh has seen what many leaders feel but rarely say: the pressure that never lifts, the loneliness that creeps in, and the culture that quietly drifts when connection fades. And that's why he wrote a best-selling book, People Matter at Work. It's a practical, powerful call to reframe leadership from separation to connection as leaders seek to replace isolation with ownership, pressure, and possibility. So I'm so excited, Josh, to have you here today. This is also something, as a former leader, was always near and dear to my heart. So I know this conversation is going to be just eye-opening and inspiring for our listeners. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, let's talk, first about the book, People Matter at Work. The title sounds simple, right? Mm-hmm. Almost obvious, but in practice, many workplaces and, leaders struggle to truly live this out. So why do you think that gap exists, and what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why people start off with the intention of a great marriage or a great relationship, and there's a gap between, their intention and their actual impact. But yeah, the pressure to perform creeps in, and then we have to decide, do we want short-term results or do we want long-term development? And the same is true with calories, right? Like what is something, I've got my Coke Zero right here. What's something that will give me a quick jump versus something that's nutrition for the long haul? And so yeah, a lot of people say that people matter, and yet the rubber really meets the road when we try to live it out as leaders.
Yeah. So you spent some time putting together some ideas and best practices. In terms of the book, what are some of the biggest misconceptions leaders have about what employees really need to thrive?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think when you say like best practices, the book is filled with best practices and worst practices, some of the mistakes that we made along the way. But I think the one that has come to mind the most is there's 3 T's in the book that really lead to creating a culture where people thrive. And the first is together. The second is thoughtful. And the third is transparent. I'm in so many rooms with leaders where they say something that's provocative and weighty and meaningful and articulate. And yet I think that when I'm in the room with them or our executive team's meeting, or we're just you and I talking like girls, is we'll say something. And my question is like, have you ever said that to your team before? Like, just like that, like, oh, well, I've got to polish it, or I've never thought that, or I need to make it more complex. And it's like, no, it's like to just say what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what you're excited about or what you're concerned about. And so I think this element of communication or transparency and saying even what you're concerned about when you don't have a solution is incredibly empowering and actually builds trust, even though you feel like it might not.
Yeah. And I think just being vulnerable and letting people know I don't know what the solution is has that rallying effect, right? Certainly. People want to lean in, they want to be part of it, and help someone who's struggling, right? We all want to do our part. So what are some practical ways that, knowing the 3 T's, so we've talked about what those are, but yeah. Saying it and then actually setting it up in an organization are 2 different things. So what are some practical ways that leaders can put that type of culture in place?
Yeah, this word thoughtful is I had it in my belly early on, or in my gut, better said, in 2011, and I'm not even sure I fully understood what it meant. But when I became a president at 29 years old, it was kind of like we just got to make thoughtful decisions. And after practicing what I thought thoughtful meant, I then came across the definition, and it means careful consideration for the needs of others. And we've all been part of an organization. We've even had those moments as leaders where we want to make a decision that's convenient for us, it's efficient, and we want to diminish its impact on others. Oh, they'll get over it, or it won't be that big of a deal, or they're just a bunch of whiners, or they'll never be happy. Those sorts of phrases really can lead us to quickly justify a haphazard decision versus a thoughtful one. And so that's my invitation to leaders is what is the impact on the people that you're leading? And frankly, what would the impact be on you if you were on the other side and you were this title or at that era of your career? And when we start to justify our own behavior by saying, oh, you know what? They just complain about everything, and so there's no win for me. That's when we start to justify thoughtless decisions, and I think it comes at a real cost.
Yeah, yeah, that's an important point. I mean, the whole notion of seek to understand, especially when there's a lot of change happening in an organization, the things you learn just by asking, how does this impact you, can lead to really breakthrough discoveries, breakthrough innovation, and also, in the case of a lot of change management, just get people on board because you've asked the question and you know more about what they're dealing with.
Huge. Curiosity is huge. And I think there are just moments, even where I sit with a leader and I say, how would you feel if you made this decision and you were on the other side of it? And there are times where they'll look at me and they'll say, I'd be really frustrated. And I say, okay, well, then don't do that. Like, to make a decision that you would be frustrated by, you've got to find another way. And if it's if it's a staff reduction or some really big decision that it feels like there's no win, hey, occasionally we're going to have a situation where we feel like we're just picking the best of the difficult options. But I think when we pick an option, it's just because we're kind of we don't want to be more creative, or we just want to ready, fire, aim. I think that it's really painful. And so when we can stop and think, what's important to you if you were on the other side, and then what's important to them. For instance, for me, I have a corner office. I have a president title. I have a lot of the benefits of senior management as well as the responsibilities. And I can't forget what it was like to become a team leader for the first time, or to become a manager, to become a vice president, or whatever it is. Nobody cares about titles anymore once you're the president of the organization, or once you're the CEO. And yet you're never forgetting that those were things that were once important to you when you were moving through your career trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true, so true. So when you look back, was there a particular story or turning point that became the emotional backbone of the book? You mentioned being a president at 29. That's an age when most people are still figuring themselves out.
Sure.
Maybe even paying off student loans still. But when you were in it, and now, like, looking in hindsight, what leadership lessons did you learn the hard way early on?
Yeah, there are a lot of them, but I would say the story that's the backbone of the book for me is we talk a lot about Emily Jones, and she's today our director of sales. She started as a sales support person and was also my executive assistant for 11 years. But at the end of an interview with Emily, she had a very limited resume and was just going through a significant life transition with her family. And at the end of the interview, I wasn't quite sure what to do. I felt maybe inferiority complex or something like that. And I saw a few people standing outside the conference room, and I asked if they would sit down with her. They knew me pretty well. I said, would you sit down with her and interview and just see if you think she'd be a good fit for the role and supporting me as I was building our Midwest region? And they loved her. They said she'd be a great fit. And I got to see just the way that when people weigh in, they buy in. And they not only they not only made the decision to hire Emily, which is one of the best decisions of my career, but they also like supported her. They were owners, they were shareholders in the decision and ultimately in her development. And so I think that was a huge piece, that when people have a voice into the decision, it makes a huge difference in the ownership that they carry.
Yeah, yeah. And I would imagine even if they were interviewing a candidate who wasn't a fit and they had a voice and were able to share that, they're still like 2 feet in the culture. Like, I'm being able to help shape and have a say in some of the talent that you bring on board.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So fantastic though. And what a great story for her to start, kind of lower in the organization and develop and grow to be one of the leading executives.
Yeah, she's a director today and runs a $15 million sales business. And totally, it's such a blast when I think about people who oftentimes, when they hear people matter, it's like, well, what about performance? And I'd say, whoa, 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 we cannot extract the two, that these are joined together, that the investment in Emily has led to her becoming an extraordinary leader. And so that's not, we don't do it for what we can get from her, but in the end, like investing in her leads to a place where she's overseeing an entire team. And so it not only has impacted her life and her journey, but it's also had a huge impact on our company's performance as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. And Josh, you talked and touched upon this a little bit earlier in terms of being a leader. Sometimes there's times of high pressure and you may be inclined to make a short-term decision that isn't the best decision. How do you personally shift from reactive leadership to purposeful leadership when stakes are high and the pressure cooker's on?
Yeah, I think everybody has a balance of what are you reacting to and what are you proacting toward. And so for me, I always came in over the course of those 15 years as president with just a few key priorities for the day or for the week. And I'm going to have a lot of things that I need to react to. It's just the way it is. But I found that if I was ever 100% reacting, it wasn't fulfilling. I wasn't doing an effective job leading the team. And if I was doing 100% proacting, then I wasn't really supporting and serving and wasn't accessible to teams. It's kind of a balance of those two, and recognizing kind of what was fulfilling, where I was strong, and ultimately where I was supporting the needs of the team. And it speaks to accessibility. I think that like for leaders who are listening to ask themselves, like, am I accessible? Because if I'm not accessible, then people are going to feel like they're out on an island and they don't have the support they need. And I want people to know that, like, I am here and I am available. You guys have a lot of freedom to make decisions, but if you ever need anything along the way, I'm available to you. I think it's super important.
Mm-hmm. And are there any, just to double click on that, are there any like checks and balances you use to say, like, how am I spending my time? Is there anything systematically that you do, or is it more of a kind of gut feeling? You look at the calendar, do a little retrospective.
For me, the right balance for me was about 50% of the day in meetings. That when it came to one-on-ones, when it came to team meetings, when it came to whether it was internal or external, if my day was about half full of meetings, that was a nice balance for me, that I was able to work with people and challenge and equip and encourage and all those sorts of things. But I was actually at the same time, the rest of the day, able to support with customers and challenges and keep up with email and all those sorts of things. So that was about a half and half for me. But I will tell you, accessibility, there are some real tests for accessibility. Is it when people walk into your office or don't walk into your office and they say, I'm so sorry, like there's almost this apologetic, and even there's a badge of honor of busyness, like, oh, you must be too busy for this. And I would just say, we are not victims to the schedules that we create. Like, the higher you move in an organization, sure, there's more responsibility, but there's also more agency to actually own what we take on and what we decide to accomplish through others. And so, like, I don't want anybody apologizing for asking for help. Like, if you need something from me, whether it's text, whether it's email, whether it's a Teams message, is that if you reach out to me, you will have a hand reaching back to you on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I also think, I'm just guessing. So this is another question for you. If if you have days where your schedule is only blocked at 50% with meetings, that must be a leading indicator that you empower your teams to make decisions. Because I'll tell you, I do some consulting and I hear again and again from the executive teams, like, we are wall to wall to wall to wall meetings. We have no time to do time. So any comments on that particular
Yeah,
point?
I mean, a lot of big companies have more meetings and longer meetings than ever before, but I think that oftentimes when we're wall to wall to wall with meetings, it's a function of either we're leading followers instead of leading leaders. So we got to they got to come to us and check on everything, and we're the ones who are guiding. And I like the analogy. I'd rather steer a rocket than push a rope. And so for me, like guiding in one-on-ones, but ultimately one of the things I want to do is I want to hold people accountable to the priorities they've put in place rather than I cast the vision, but then ultimately it's their job to come up with the objectives and the priorities to move us toward that vision. But wall to wall to wall, I would even ask the question, like, Microsoft and most calendars, they plan things in like 15 minutes or 30 or an hour increment. Do those meetings need to be an hour? Like, how
Mhm.
many meetings today could be 20? Like, I just have 22-minute meetings. Or you as the leader get to decide the culture that you're going to create. And so when we have one-on-ones, I'm not trying to cheapen our time. We do 22 minutes instead of 60 because if I do all 22 minutes, then it allows me to be accessible to you when you need me outside of those one-on-one times. And so I'm not doing it because I'm stingy or because of scarcity. I'm actually doing it to create more margin to support you in other times. And so I just think it requires some creativity because there are a lot of those meetings that don't need to be an hour or an hour and a half or 3 hours or whatever they are stacked on the calendar.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I like the idea of 22 minutes. It just sounds like
I just
it's just
picked
a
it. That's
it's
totally, we
just a
never even talked
reminder.
about it. That's right. Never come up with the time in my life, but it's yeah,
Uh-huh.
it just feels like it's long enough to dig in. And yet, let's be honest, how many times has a meeting gotten really great and become super efficient and more effective at meeting 47?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true, so true. So, in the book, you have an idea that you reference and created the we cycle.
Uh-huh.
Can you share a bit more about what that means for our listeners and talk about what separates teams that truly win together from teams that simply work alongside of each other?
Yeah, so I loved work growing up. I grew up in a home where work was a positive thing, and in my 20s, I went out into the corporate world and I just realized that work had become the four-letter word of our time. And so as I began leading and asking the question, what if we could create a place where people love to work? I just architected the me cycle. So the opposite of the we cycle is bosses look out for themselves, employees return the favor, and work just stinks for everyone. And so then I started to ask myself, what is the antidote? Like, we've lived out, what if we could create a place where people love to work and tried to care and love and support and see people really well. And I came across the three T's I mentioned earlier. And what I began to recognize is that if I live with those three T's at the forefront, together, work together to make thoughtful decisions, and I'm transparent about those decisions, it creates a culture where people are safe, seen, and successful. And so
Mm-hmm.
psychologically safe, again, that's talked about in Amy Edmondson's book. You have
Mm-hmm.
seen this idea of we all come into the world looking for someone looking for us. And then you have successful. Everybody wants to be successful. And so when we have people who are safe, seen, and successful, they respond by carrying deep in trust, strengthened ownership, and they're generous back. They give back because we have been generous to them. And so the trust, ownership, and generosity. And when people respond in that way, the backpack doesn't get heavier for the leader. It actually spreads the weight and it encourages us to continue forward to the we cycle where leaders are live out the three T's. People respond by feeling safe, seen, and successful, and ultimately trust grows, ownership deepens, and generosity flourishes. That's the we cycle in a minute and a half.
Mm-hmm. Well done, well done. Yeah, and I think that's it's just a great and very simple way to keep on, kind of keep a tab on what the culture should look like, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it makes complete sense. right? I mean, if people are good to you and you feel like you're in a place where you can do your best work, you are going to be generous with your time. You are going to care more.
Your creativity, your ownership, it changes everything. And so, yeah, I have found, even after writing the book, trying to live it out, then kind of reverse engineer for others who are asking, to then go, like, when you struggle, when I talk with our leaders, is this an issue of not working together? Is this an issue of not being thoughtful, carefully considering the needs of others? Or is this an issue of not being transparent, especially in the realm of feedback? I mean, transparency, I mean, like, the number of times a leader is not forthright with their people, it generally, one of the issues we're facing comes down to one of the three T's.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to have that reference or guidepost just to double click on what might need attention. And it is connected to this next question. And I think this question is one of the harder things to manage in business today. Especially when organizations are scaling or they go through a merger and acquisition where two cultures are coming together. So the question is, what are some subtle signs that a company is scaling operationally but losing its soul culturally?
Yeah, I always joke that laughter's the great test. That when you go into an unsafe environment, the first thing to leave is laughter. And so we like to cultures with humor, cultures with levity, and that's kind of the opposite of pressure. It's not that there isn't pressure, it's just how do we respond to that pressure. I think laughter is really important. And one of the things that's most challenging for a company to scale from 6 people to 600 or 6,000 is this idea that your experience is so dramatically impacted by your leader that if you work at a hospital or Microsoft or wherever it is, the CEO can be like mind-bogglingly intelligent, articulate. They can be inspiring. But that doesn't matter if, I mean, sure, it might weigh in like 5-10% or something like that. But if your boss, if your leader is someone who's not calling out the gold in you, and so that's what really gets challenging, is you have this charismatic leader who's super caring, in my case, has our last name on the company. And then as the company builds and you have 8 layers or 12 or 15, is that a person's experience is only as good as the leader who's leading them in many cases. And the only thing that's worse than being a part of a toxic culture is having a terrible experience at a healthy culture, or where they talk about, oh, people matter, oh, eye roll, right? And so it is really hard for us at our organization to invite people that if you're having a negative experience, we want to know it and we want to close that gap, because it's very lonely to have a negative experience in a place where most people are having a positive one.
Yeah, for sure. And people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Yeah,
usually.
they for sure. They do.
Yeah. So here's another kind of, leadership moment question. Looking back on your career, was there an opportunity where choosing people over short-term profit or efficiency felt risky, but ultimately proved right?
Yeah. Beginning of COVID, I'm on vacation and the world starts to shut down. This little virus that's in Asia then works its way to Washington. And all of a sudden I looked at my wife and I said, I think this is a big deal. Like it's a big deal in that our kids aren't going to go to school probably for the rest of the year. But it's a big deal. I mean, this thing could last for like, honey, weeks. Well, little did we know that this thing would be years. And so when we flew back, masks on for the first time because the world's trying to figure out what's going on. And we got to the office, and I just remember, like through the lens of thoughtful, saying to the team, our number one goal is to keep you employed from start to finish. This was a security moment that one half of the organization was worried about getting sick. The other half of the organization was worried about their jobs. And so for us to say, we don't care about 2021, 2022, 2023, long-term profit, none of that matters. We're focused on keeping you employed. Well, what happened is we had task forces and all kinds of stuff. But shortly after that, the government started providing unemployment subsidies such that for a good percentage of our team, they could have gone home and not worked and made more.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. They kept
Mm.
showing up. Some were remote, some were visiting hospitals and delivering x-ray equipment, all that sort of stuff. But because we took the first move and we said, we're looking out for you, the team reciprocated and they looked out for the company. And it was a big moment. It was one of those moments that I didn't know what the government was going to do, but I talked to other leaders who would say, I can't get my people to come back. They're getting paid more to sit on the couch than they are coming back to work. And we didn't have that issue. And I think it paid incredible dividends for us to go first and say, you're first on our mind. And we can't promise the future. I mean, we don't know it any better than you do, but we at least made the vision for what we were after clear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, truly, that example is living the mantra of people matter at work.
Yeah.
Right? That's awesome.
And knowing what people were thinking is that anyone who's wrapped up in themselves at the moment and kind of goes to fear, you immediately then turn inward and you're just, oh man, what am I going to do? And it's all about me. And the more that we as leaders can say, this moment isn't really about me. This moment is about this moment is about we and leading people through that. And it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And taking that a step farther, so everything that you're sharing with me and those, real life examples give me the clear visual that you've created a place with emotional safety. And just thinking about that, have you seen benefits of, more innovative ideas or
Sure.
Benefits for the longer term performance, any more color on that particular area?
Sure. So on the one side, as I talked about in a one-on-one, that I have the opportunity to be a leader who responds to other leaders, that this is your time. You come in, you come up with ideas, and what a dream. There are some people walk into a one-on-one like, what are we going to talk about? And I hadn't prepared. I don't have to prepare for a one-on-one at all. This is your time. This is my gift to you. You are going to share. We're going to ask some questions. You're going to share. You're going to lead the time, and then we're going to leave with more clarity and direction. And so just the creativity that comes to bear when your job, like you talked earlier, your job is to be part of the solution to help move us from here to there. So that's kind of the one-on-one micro side, is that the creativity and the risk-taking and the sense of ownership is so much deeper. And then on the other side, I don't really love talking about this one a whole lot because I think it can be manipulated, but retention is that what is the cost and the impact both socially and from a strategic perspective when people are leaving all the time. And in some big companies, it's okay. We'll just slot somebody else into that position and it's like Lego pieces. But for us, we have had people stay over long periods of time and their knowledge grows. And it goes back to that lesson. What if we train people and they leave? And the response is, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? This idea of like investing in them. And investing in people. And so you have that like creativity and the risk taking, but then you have people who stay and they build something and they get to be a part of. I mean, we just had someone cross their 20-year mark on Monday, and the company, what it looked like when he started versus what it is today. He's gotten to be a part of that journey. He's gotten to grow with it. And it's a gift to the organization. And ultimately it's a gift to him and his family as well.
Yeah, that is so nice. And retention is important. And it's also interesting, whenever you add one new person to the team, I would say it's a new team.
Sure.
Because you have new skills, you have new dynamics. It's a whole new ball game. But it's great to hear that people really enjoy what they do with your organization. For leaders who are successfully externally but exhausted internally, and I'm hearing this all over the board as I talk to leaders cross industry, what does sustainable leadership actually look like in practice? And, if you can describe it, also, what are some tips to helping that leader stay in a place where they can deliver on ensuring people understand they matter?
Yeah, there are a lot of dimensions to this, but one of the biggest challenges for leaders today is that what made them a successful contributor will not make them a successful leader. So if you're a strong technician, you're really efficient, really effective, you get more done with less, and you work well with others and all the sorts of things, you check a lot of boxes, and then you get tapped on the shoulder, you're invited into leadership, and you continue with those same behaviors, that you find your worth, you find your identity, you find your purpose in accomplishing things on your own. And that you think you have to know everything, and the shift from my job is to accomplish things on my own to my job is to actually cast vision and accomplish things to other people. That even that mindset is such a game changer. But to those who are carrying pressure and they're too busy, if you're too busy for 2 weeks, then you have a situational challenge. If you're busy for 2 months, you have a seasonal challenge. And if you're busy for 2 years, you're not busy anymore. That's who you are. This is part of who you are. And so to ask yourself, like, what are some boundaries? Just like if a grizzly bear were to come and live in your living room, start tearing stuff apart, you would begin to find a way to create boundaries so that there isn't a grizzly bear in your kitchen. And the same thing is true, is that you have something that's invading. You've allowed it to invade for too much for too long. And so it's our job. What are some of the boundaries we need to create so that we can be healthy and we can be balanced, so that then we can lead people who are healthy and balanced? And so I think this whole idea of I'm too busy, I have too much on my plate, it is something that needs to be solved, just like any other disease that we would try to solve.
Right. Right. Yeah. Your best decisions are never made on like half of a tank.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And also the reminds me when you say that, sorry for cutting you off, is the AI, like this idea of all these people finding all these things to complain about, whether it's AI or remote work or the next generation. And I would say, like, wait a second. So you were too busy. Then you have this tool that can potentially allow you to accomplish more with less. Are you using that to increase your capacity and reduce your load? Or are you doing this to increase your capacity and just continue carrying more and more and more? Is when are we using tools to actually support our growth and our stability? And when are we using a tool just to run further and faster?
Right, right. Yeah, as you said, like busyness is not the mile marker of success. Really isn't.
It's you, and this is my experience, it's not an indictment, but if you are doing a great job as a leader, there should be seasons where you're carrying less and less, your people are carrying more and more. You are actually passing the baton, and you are eventually the best leaders when the task is done and the job is complete. They are actually replacing themselves. And for many of us, that could not be more opposite from what's really going on, is that every day we come to work, we become more and more integral to the puzzle, when it should be the opposite.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's just building a healthy legacy. And some leaders have a problem with that, right? I mean, their own self-importance, their own,
sure.
Don't want to be irreplaceable, but certainly in so many ways, they're short-sighted from their own potential and development and learning and, maybe doing that next best thing instead of just being stuck in one place on that hamster wheel.
Yeah, I just wrote an article about Fast Company about this succession and this idea of, like, I think that the succession plan, which was totally accidental, totally overnight, 72 hours from sales rep to president, it turned out to be a real gift to me and our organization. Well, I wouldn't recommend 72 hours. I still think that some of the next generation is not waiting to release the baton to their successors because their successors aren't ready. That's the excuse. Wait, the successor's not ready. The reality is, I think you're not ready. You're not ready to let go of it because this is so central to your identity, when in reality, if you're in a position to be letting go and passing the baton, if you don't pass that baton, you will eventually have no one who's worthy of receiving that baton. They're all gone. And then you look around, you're like, wow, who will I give this role or this organization or whatever it is to? And it's like, they're gone. And so that's why in those early stages, when we have these young and talented people, we got to give them more and more responsibility, release that baton, and find vision and identity in our lives beyond our role, because otherwise we'll be handcuffed to the job that we thought was going to create us freedom in the first place.
Yeah, so true. So true. So Josh, as we wind down, certainly you have this amazing book, and we'll put the link to Amazon in terms of like how to get it, People Matter at Work. We also have the website, peoplematteratwork.com, where people can learn more. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of listeners hitting your site as they start to digest some of the things that you said today. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the listeners with before we close?
I just think that moving at the pace of people and choosing to invest deeply instead of investing with a short-term lens pays some incredible dividends in the lives of people, in the lives of performance, in the lives of the children that our people lead. And so it's so worth it. We don't have to choose either or, but when we invest deeply in people, and like this phrase, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like when we take the time to invest in people, it's just an amazing journey. I think not only is it a better life, but it leads to some incredible growth in people and performance.
Yeah. I feel like this was a locker room pep talk for leaders. Like if you could gather them and, close and say, this is what we got to do, and these are the ways you're going to see if it's working. And so it's such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, Josh. And I look forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
All right. So with that, we will sign off until next time.
Thank you for listening. Our hope is to spark a little joy, inspire, and educate our listeners in ways to live an even more meaningful life. If you have reactions to share from what you've heard, please visit our website, refirement.life, to leave a voice message. You may even be featured in a future episode. To keep in touch, subscribe to our podcast, Refirement Life, using the podcast player of your choice. Always remember, you are never too old to set a new goal or to dream a new dream. Thanks again for joining us on this episode. Until next time.